Recently, the old neoconservative Robert Kagan was on with Terry Gross, wowing all the new generation, all the people who don't remember the role he played in the death of a million Iraqis. Robert Kagan is co-founder of Project for a New American Century. He is one of the central reasons we killed those a million Iraqis. His last book, called The Jungle Grows Back, is an overtly racist overture saying that the entire planet has to be dominated by the West. There won't be peace unless the entire planet is dominated by the West. He has spent his entire life at the Brookings Institute, the Carnegie Endowment, and the Council on Foreign Relations, institutions paid for by the most elite financiers. The Council on Foreign Relations being called by some Wall Street's think tank. Please do not take Robert Kagan at his word. But realize that Robert Kagan is not dumb. He's a key member of the establishment political strategists club. He hobnobs across the whole spectrum of establishment spaces. He sits in back rooms with the country's most powerful people and builds strategy to amass them power. Just look how clever his narrative is. Here's an example from the interview with Terry Gross. Robert Kagan says that ICE activity is designed to elicit protest so as to provide a predicate for invoking the Insurrection Act. What Kagan is doing here is very smart. He takes the establishment plan to use civil unrest to undermine the legitimacy of a democratically elected president, Trump, and then forwards this plan by pre-framing that unrest as the president's own fault and as evidence of the president's own authoritarian plan. Now, I'm not saying Trump doesn't have an authoritarian plan. I'm not. I'm saying that Robert Kagan is using Trump as a foil to hide the establishment's own Machiavellian manipulations. The strategy works all the better in Trump's case because there is a lot of truth in the claims upon which it is based. This kind of three moves ahead strategic thinking is impossible for most people to deconstruct. It has a level of cognitive complexity that saturates the intellectual resources of most of us. We lose ourselves in the narrative just enough that it obscures our capacity to see through it to its deeper motives. We feel it's true because it's satisfyingly comprehensive, and then we surrender our critical faculties. We can't do that. Here are some more examples from the interview. Robert Kagan says that fighting for the American way, people who are supporting this idea of fighting for the American way, Robert Kagan casts this as a dog whistle for white Christian nationalism. Fair enough. Sometimes it is. But in its place, Robert Kagan recommends that America be defined in terms of universal human rights. That is, the only cultural particularity that Robert Kagan allows just happens to be the ideology tied to NATO justifications for war and economic expansion. He doesn't talk about the Bill of Rights. He doesn't talk about the Constitution. He talks about universal human rights. And that just slips through without justification. Here's another example. Kagan proceeds to tell us that Trump's delusions of grandeur and lack of humility are turning the world against the United States, and maybe so. But how am I supposed to stomach this claim from perhaps the most effective salesman of Bush's Iraq War? And he doesn't even pause for a moment to reflect on his own murderous error. And then we turn to Trump's various policy prerogatives, foreign policy prerogatives, Venezuela, Greenland, Israel, détente with Russia, etc. Against this, are we to believe that Robert Kagan is some kind of new convert peacenik? Kagan makes it clear, of course not. Instead, we are to return quickly to the important business of carving the Ukraine off of Russia's flank. His financial benefactors need that meat back on the table, guys. Cargill, Monsanto, BlackRock, all of George Soros's companies throughout Eastern Europe. He's working for the people who pay him. And here's where it gets really insidious. Well, some of the same financiers pour money into groups like the Tides Foundation and Indivisible to support protests you might agree with. And while masters of nation-state destabilization at the State Department do cameos on Stephen Colbert, urging us toward unrest, Robert Kagan slips in here and deploys more expert-level preemptive narrative shaping against any attempt by President Trump to challenge establishment control over media and elections, against any use of federal troops to quell riots, and against any critique by Trump of deep state actors. We are here pre-programmed by Robert Kagan to interpret Trump's actions not as responses, but as him carrying out his pre-planned authoritarian playbook. Again, Trump may have that, but he's also acting within an environment that is being actively shaped by other actors, very powerful in our civil society, our corporate world, and our other political centers of power. So, while we are made to see the pre-planned authoritarian playbook claimed against Trump, never mind that we can already see in Robert Kagan's own strange foresight that this is already part of the establishment's own plan to cast it that way. We've got to keep track of the way all of these sides are using us to their ends. We can't let the next, savior come in with his critique and be so deluded by it, so caught up in it, so angry at our last enemy that we don't see the new enemy that's coming from our left.